Hi, welcome to Innovative Leaders Driving Thriving Organizations. I'm your host, Maureen Metcalf. I'm the founder and CEO of the Innovative Leadership Institute. I work with leaders in their organizations, identifying the trends that will most likely disrupt their businesses and develop business strategies and business and leadership practices to leverage these trends to create strategic advantage. I'm a regular contributor to Forbes and the lead author on an award-winning book series focusing on innovating how you lead and transforming your organization. I'm also an adjunct faculty member of universities in U.S. and Germany. I am delighted that today with us is Jesse Newton. He's the founder and CEO of Simplify Work, a global consultancy that specializes in unburdening organizations from paralyzing complexity. His clients include Mondelez International, McDonald's Corp., and PepsiCo. Prior to launching Simplify Work, he was a senior manager at Booz & Company in their change leadership consulting practice, and also spent a number of years consulting around the world with Ernst & Young's people and organization change practice. In today's session, we'll be talking about his book, Simplify Work, Crushing Complexity to Liberate Innovation, Productivity, and Engagement. Jesse delivers a newfound clarity on the case for simplifying and the steps organizations and individuals need to take to unleash their potential. He reveals the common drivers of debilitating complexity and provides a recipe for reducing and removing the things that get in the way of peak performance. So this show, the Innovative Leaders program, I created for leaders who are dealing with crushing complexity and overcommitted, because it is hard for us to both work crazy hours and stay current as leaders. So I invite each of you to listen to our conversation and see if there's anything you can take away to apply immediately to your work or to change your thought processes. By making small changes on a weekly basis, we as leaders avoid the risk of being depreciated or outdated and even possibly obsolete as leaders. During the times where we are facing such massive changes, it is our responsibility to stay on top of our organizations and on top of also our craft of leadership to ensure that our organizations thrive. So welcome, Jesse. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Is there anything you want to tell us about your background before we jump into your book?
Well, I think you covered most of the key points. As you mentioned, my background is the management consulting. And as you can tell from the accent, not originally from the US, so I've had the opportunity to live and work in New Zealand, Australia, Europe, and now America for the past decade. And I've had the great opportunity to work with over 100 companies, and really that experience, coupled with extensive research, really drove the content for this book. And very excited to be able to come on here and discuss it with you.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted that you're willing to share your experience and your book. Okay, so the recipe for simplifying complexity and realigning focus on true priorities, can you give us a little bit of background for that? I'm thinking about the combination of how we get to where we are. Often things get kludged together as we're responding to one fire after the next, and we don't go back and readjust the processes of how we work as we're following across the finish line and going to the next. So this is your area of research. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got here and this idea of realigning focus?
Absolutely. So it's really an exciting opportunity. As I mentioned, having worked across so many companies across a range of different contexts, the work that I do as a consultant normally focuses on companies going through transformation, whether it's merger acquisition, system implementation, major org restructure, performance improvement. But reflecting on these experiences really dawned on me how each of these companies really battles with complexity on a different scale. And the opportunity to really get clear on what's most important and look to shed those things that are getting in the way of true priorities is massive, is significant. And so within the book, I talk about the major sources of that complexity, but then also this new approach to problem solving that can really drive the process for simplifying work. So happy to either talk through some of those typical sources of complexity, but also, how do you actually get there? What are the specific steps and methods to go about simplifying organizations? So point me in the right direction.
I'd like to do both. How do we get here, and definitely how do we get out of it? I'm sitting in an office with a client right now who is facing this exact problem. So let's talk first about sources and then solutions.
Yeah. So essentially, organizations have become these complicated messes. Traditionally, as organizations have grown, they add more structures and processes, rules, metrics, committees, and so on. This inevitably results in people becoming reactive firefighters, to the point that you alluded to earlier. People don't have enough time in the day to get through their work, and they often feel overwhelmed with the breadth of, their responsibility. And it's a shame because people essentially are wasting their time and energy trying to navigate, the labyrinth that is their organization. They're trying to complete the latest report or template. They're sitting in meetings that should be emails. They're reporting to multiple bosses. They get lost in the web of predefined processes. And really importantly, they lose sight of what's most important. And they lose the excitement and energy to really innovate well and fast. And so when we looked at organizations and in the research, there are these typical drivers, and they range from broad strategy, where is an organization operating, how many product services, how is their organization structured, which is the second piece, the operating model, to deliver on those different objectives and strategic goals. The third is process. How does process drive the way work gets done within an organization? And, are they strictly defined? And so there are all of these requirements to follow these specific steps. Then there's system. What is the system architecture within a company? And do people need to navigate through various systems to get their work done? And then finally and importantly, there's culture. And companies breed certain ways of working which really reinforces complexity within an organization. It's the desire to email everyone on everything, to make sure that you're covering your butt, or needing to socialize all work that you're doing with various groups in the company to make sure that everyone has exposure. And inevitably what happens with those situations is, you'll get a piece of work to a really good place, and then someone will have another new piece of feedback, and you'll need to then, turn your wheels again on a piece of work, and it really sort of slows work. So, productivity decreases, and engagement goes down. And then, the way that people communicate. So typically within, the traditional organizations, they'd need to go through their bosses to communicate with another function, or leaders couldn't simply, connect with the front line. They'd have to go through the multiple layers of bosses to connect with that lower level, which serves the slow work, and really reduces the richness of the connections and the content that's shared between those two groups. And so there's all kinds of key sources of complexity within a company that I'm sure most people that have worked in the company have experienced to some degree.
Okay, so let me repeat back because I missed the first one. I have structure, aligning the organization with the goals, having processes that focus on that, having a culture that allows appropriate level of input at a proper speed, and communication where I can go directly to the right person. Which one did I miss? I think it was the first one you said.
So it's 5 things. First is strategy, then structure, system, process, and culture. And so, happy to talk to each. But really, I think it has to start at that highest level. You have to get really clear on what's most important, because if out of the gate, if you're not clear on what's most important for your organization, you can't prioritize. And so that's why strategy has to be the first piece. And it can also, you can target a simplification effort for various levels within an organization. So it can be the macro for the whole organization, or it could be a function, it could be a specific team. But the first step is always getting clear on purpose. What are we seeking to achieve in whatever context? Nail that. And then you can set about understanding how work gets done, where are people spending their time, and then thirdly, remove the stuff that gets in the way of the highest priorities. Redesign work. And so to do that, you're often looking at structures, process, systems, and then behaviors, which is the cultural piece. And so there are some really interesting emerging perspectives on how do you actually simplify an organization from a structure perspective, and which is really serving to help to move organizations out of the 20th century into the 21st, liberate the intelligence and capabilities of their people, and move away from some of these sort of stodgy and outdated approaches to getting work done.
So would you share some of those structures? I heard clearly we need to be clear on our purpose, clear on our key strategic initiatives so everything doesn't get the same priority, and right, where we're either constantly switching priorities or where we think we can get everything done and consequently don't do the key things with the level of focus required. So now structure.
Well, we're in a very interesting time where companies are beginning to take a big step back and look at their organization through a new lens. The traditional org structure was very vertical, and it was very power-based. The assumption of the typical org structure was we as leaders are going to define strategy and set direction, and then we want to control the output of the machine. And so human beings were considered as cogs in the machine. And so to manage the output of the cogs, you need very clear roles and responsibilities and expectations, and your output needs to be very clearly articulated. And then you have the bosses that manage that output. And we're moving away from that now. We're realizing 2019 now, which is exciting, and where we are now is we realize and we have the knowledge of how people do their best work. People do their best work in small teams. They do their best work when they have some degree of autonomy, and they have access to the right information. And so given that we now know how to get the best of the human capital factor of human beings, coupled with where we are from a technology perspective, we can begin to free people, to liberate people to work in their best way to produce that breakthrough innovation. And so how does that come to life? It means that we're not building these vertical hierarchies. We're now designing these autonomous small teams to go after key strategic priorities. We're looking at back office functions and discovering new ways of automating repeatable process. And so it's a very exciting time because large organizations, the Amazons, the INGs, are showing us that large organizations can actually break the bureaucracy, free small teams of highly capable people that deliver the breakthrough innovations that are disrupting industries and producing breakthrough technologies. Feel free to ask any follow-up questions, because happy to go into that in more detail.
Yeah, I do have a question, and it is specifically, you mentioned roles and responsibilities. So yeah. It seems like if I'm going to have teams that are more autonomous, I have to be incredibly clear on what outcome that team is going to produce so that each of my teams are aligned to deliver those strategic goals. Is that correct, or am I missing something?
Yeah, the way that this is otherwise called an agile organization, or there's the idea of a holacracy, and so the way that they're designed is that you've got these carefully selected individuals working on a team, and to your point, the outcome or the objective is crystal clear, and the strategy of the organization is crystal clear, and so there are these broad parameters set for the small team. Okay, there could be a budget parameter, there could be some broad time frame parameter, but the vision of their objective should be crystal clear. But then how they go about working together and testing and iterating is fully up to them. And there are some organizations that have these sort of floating PMOs that sort of informally connect to gauge status of where they are. It's less formal and with the focus on getting out of the way of the team. So you want that team of high performers to have that rich sense of autonomy, that ability to really innovate and focus their time and energy on that top priority and bring it to life. There's a company out of Finland that is a video game production company, and they famously leverage this same model. And there's a game that basically has essentially created 85% of their success, and so I think it's War of the Worlds, but they basically have given their teams free rein to be able to focus in on and produce games that they see will be successful within the remit of the company's broader sort of purpose. And so, this sort of design is really essential to drive that breakthrough innovation. If you have people that are coming into work and essentially, following predefined processes, simply adhering to their four managers' instructions, expectations, inevitably, thinking and innovation is going to suffer.
Perfect. So let's take a break here, because sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. Let's take a break here, and I would love to come back and hear a little bit more about this company and the idea of the amount of autonomy versus predefined processes. So you are listening to Innovative Leaders Driving Thriving Organizations. We are with Jesse Newton talking about simplifying work. Welcome back to Innovative Leaders Driving Thriving Organizations. You are joining Maureen Metcalf and Jesse Newton, and we're talking about Jesse's books, Simplify Work, Crushing Complexity to Liberate Innovation, Productivity and Engagement. So before the break, Jesse talked about the key components of simplifying work, and we were talking specifically about the balance between rigid processes and giving teams the authority to go off and complete their work in a way that is much more autonomous. And Jesse, you were giving the example of a game manufacturer and how they've done this incredibly successfully. Do you want to elaborate more on that before we go to the next question?
Sure. Well, just the context of this particular organization, European-based, and, they make games, essentially, for smartphones and for, other, larger game organizations. And essentially the source of their success is this agile structure. They really are very careful with who they select, from a recruitment perspective, and then who should be within each of these innovative teams. And so, the selection of each individual is an important component of the agile organization. And because you're dependent on the output of these autonomous teams, when you're looking at key capabilities within your human capital, you need people that work well in teams, obviously. You need them to be able to collaborate effectively, problem solve, build from other people's ideas, are able to rapidly sort of synthesize new information and extrapolate insight. And so it's interesting how this emerging agile organization has pretty important considerations, implications for the recruitment of people and the capabilities that an organization should nurture in their population.
So I don't know that all of our listeners know exactly what an agile team is, especially outside of the context of agile software development. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you define being an agile team?
Sure. It's so I think of it as an agile team is the crux of an agile organization. And so an agile team essentially is guided by a strong vision, purpose, strategy at the top. So the leader's role in an agile organization is hugely important, but there's less of a focus on power and more on enabling. And so agile teams work when they've got the right individuals, when they've got that true sense of autonomy, so that there isn't this traditional vertical hierarchy where they're reporting into managers and there's reports and templates they need to produce. They're free to work in a way that suits them, and they've got access to the right information. And so leaders, a key part of their responsibility is feeding the right information to the teams to facilitate and enable innovation and collaboration, which is very much a part of that enabling focus. And then the managers shift from what have you done for me lately to how can I help and coach you? What do you need from a development standpoint? Is there potentially a conflict that needs to be facilitated? And so they're very much more of a developer and someone that can enable really effective teaming versus the let me control everything that you do and go off and do what I say. So really important shifts in perspective and paradigm from the traditional vertical hierarchy to the agile organization, and a few key things that need to be in place for an agile team to really be able to work quickly and well and produce those sort of breakthrough innovations. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I'm actually thinking of a specific client situation where, and this is a small example, but sometimes these structural pieces really help, where they're shifting the role of the leadership team instead of driving the tactics. That what they do in their meetings is talk about how they're working cross-organization to enable results. So their communication content has changed, frequency has changed, and by doing that, then they're, I think, doing what you're talking about, getting out of the way of this is how you get it done, and more focusing on key decisions and removing barriers and making sure team members have what they need. Is that the kind of example you're talking about?
Absolutely spot on. I mean, when you take a big step back and you think about, broader market industries right now, consumer preferences are shifting so quickly, and, technology is really driving disruption across every industry. And so companies have to be able to innovate well and fast. And if you're bogged down in slow decision-making or siloed protectionism, the company is destined to fail. And also it drives low engagement. I recently worked with a large consumer packaged goods organization, specifically within their commercial function, so sales and marketing. And they were really suffering from engagement. And then when we really leaned into the space, we quickly realized that really high-paid global experts across sales and marketing were spending a huge chunk of their week doing low-value administrative tasks. They weren't doing and spending their time and their energy on the highest priority activities, on the things they were hired for. And so by targeting in, by getting very clear on what those low-value activities were, we could then proactively remove them and redesign how they get their work done so that they could spend the most quality time on the pieces of work that's driving the greatest impact on organizations. And so the opportunity across companies to simplify work is just massive.
I really appreciate the thoroughness of your framework. That you are in fact saying we need to change. We need to ensure our strategy is solid. We need to align structures with goals, attend to process, communication, and culture, because I think it is the combination of all of those facets that really drive our ability to focus on what is most strategically important and not get bogged down. And again, I'm thinking of different clients and how they have the expectation of themselves as a leadership team that senior execs are aware of minute details, which then drives behaviors for the senior executives to focus on things that aren't strategic.
Exactly. How many organizations have 25 different strategic initiatives, And inevitably, people are going to get pulled in too many directions. I think there's just a general, and it's inevitable and natural, but there's this general lack of understanding and alignment on the true strategic priorities. So I think leadership can do a better job and of actually distilling down where is the company going to be successful, where is it going to win, in the next 5 years. And be very specific about it, and then let that be the lens that you drive those initiatives, those key organizational initiatives. There are lots of great ideas that bubble up to an organization, but should all of them, take up people's time and energy? I think there needs to be more work done on prioritizing focus so that people are, really working on the highest priority strategic initiatives.
As you say that again, I'm thinking of the discipline required for senior leaders. So, again, thinking of a client who's saying we've just acquired another company and we're trying to do the integration process. As soon as that senior executive team starts reaching into the organization and asking for minute details, they are driving inappropriate behavior from everyone from the senior team all the way down. And so the idea that we as leaders have to think very clearly about even small requests and what behaviors are rippling through the organization because of that.
Oh, absolutely. There's one organization I worked with where, the leaders talked specifically about crushing complexity, and it was something they were very aware of, was slowing productivity, disengaging the workforce, etc. But then the leaders would then quickly ask for performance reports across the organization. And as soon as they ask the question, then you've got teams pulled from, their core work and to produce those performance reports. And so, to your point, that there really has to be a concerted, disciplined focus on simplifying work and clarity on what it means and on what those key behaviors are that really drive complexity, and then those that serve to simplify and focus.
So when you work with clients, how do you help them keep this front of mind? Because it's inadvertent, I think, in many cases. I think I need something, so I reach out and ask somebody for it, and I don't always consider that this little request is going to drive bad behavior.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of approaches or ways to think about keeping it front of mind. The first harks back to this agile organization. If that's really properly rolled out, then it somewhat takes care of itself, because you're essentially leveraging the best capabilities with the latest technology to get all the reporting, all the performance information should be automated so that leaders can get real-time access to how a company is performing, which means they don't need to ask, people to provide that information. So that's very quickly becoming available to organizations, but it requires investment, and there's a bit of time required to actually build that capability. But once that's there, then, you have these people, these teams of people that have the autonomy to produce their best work. So that I'm not going to go back to the agile organization, but that's the first piece. The second one would be, it has to be a true strategic focus, and leaders need to keep it front of mind. And, when I think about change management programs we've led in the past, there are various ways of just continuing to reinforce, that focus and the critical behaviors that drive, a simplified focus workforce. And the third would be, what I talk about in the book is the use of design thinking, or having a design thinking perspective on how work gets done. And so design thinking is essentially, taking a leaf out of the school of design. It's what the guys at IDEO, it's their methodology for solving problems and innovating. And essentially, it's all about just putting yourself in the user's shoes. And so from an organization perspective, it's leaning in and listening and observing how work actually gets done. And so the intent being building a rich, real perspective of how work gets done. And with that perspective, you can then be very deliberate and focused on pulling out and removing all of the stuff that's getting in the way of teams performing at their best. And you can take a very expansive approach, to actually figuring out what are the root causes of people, getting stuck in organizational complexity, and then, once you've identified those, you can serve to solve those in various ways. But the point being is, there are other ways, other than the typical consulting or the typical organization approach to problem solving, they can also reveal really interesting, helpful, innovative ways of crushing complexity. So there's those sort of three things, exploring the agile organization operating model. The second one being, look at ways from a sort of a change management communications perspective of keeping simplifying work a true priority and reinforcing it, in various mechanisms. And then the third is, attempting to look at organizational complexity through the lens of a different school of thought, that being design thinking. So hopefully that sort of answers your question.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And we're going to go on break here. This is Maureen Metcalf and Jesse Newton, and we are talking about simplifying work, crushing complexity to liberate innovation, productivity, and engagement. And Jesse is walking us through ways we can put his approach into practice. We will be right back with our final segment. Welcome back to Innovative Leaders Driving Thriving Organizations. You are joining Maureen Metcalf and Jesse Newton, and we are talking about simplifying work. So, Jesse, one of the things you talk about in the book is how do we take advantage of the fourth industrial revolution and unleashing the performance gains we've seen in prior terms. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yes, absolutely. So we're in this very interesting space right now. We're on this front step of what they're calling the fourth industrial revolution. But interestingly, we haven't achieved the massive productivity gains that the prior three industrial revolutions delivered. And I believe that a big reason for that is because of the complex nature of organizations today. This fourth industrial revolution is really, it's described as the emergence of artificial intelligence and big data, the Internet of Things. And so we have this emerging technology which is creating opportunities to really drive a step change in productivity, across society. But we're not really leveraging those opportunities. And I think from a simplified work perspective, in my mind, the opportunities really are around elevating people out of the repeatable, standardized processes and work, and really liberating the thinking and the innovation and the energy and passions of people, which is very much enabled by this emerging technology. So, let's take a typical organization. You've got numerous people that would traditionally come into work and produce the reports or capture the data or input the data or, do various things that soak up their time and energy that currently could be automated. And so the premise is, how do we, across organizations around the world, identify huge tracts of work across an organization that can be automated, that is low value, that does produce real-time insights into the business, that then people can then focus their time on leveraging to innovate and solve problems and collaborate. And so I think if this whole idea of simplifying work presents an opportunity for organizations to really elevate their productivity and elevate the output, engagement of their people by leveraging partly, this emerging technology, which is part of this broader fourth industrial revolution.
And so that seems like it is driving the complete vision of what work looks like in the future, that probably in the next 5 years, we're seeing it already, but we will see more. If I think of my Google Assistant and all the stuff I get just on my phone, it tells me where I'm supposed to go, how long it's going to take to get there, when I'm late. I am kind of managed by my mobile device right now, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of the information available to any of us at our fingertips that used to be done by a person, either me or someone who worked for me. And again, that's a small example. What is your vision for the future of work that leverages this range of tools from machine learning, artificial intelligence, data and analytics?
Well, those are great points. Those are perfect examples of where we're headed and how technology will work with us side by side. Essentially, my vision for the future of work is human beings shouldn't be stuck and doing work that's repeatable, that is standardized. It's very exciting when you think about the prospect of organizations full of people that really believe in the purpose of the company, that have all the tools and the information, the insights to be able to actively collaborate with their colleagues and really do amazing work. So the essential simple vision is around organizations that heavily leverage technology to be able to automatically pull data from across the business, crunch it, store it, analyze it, and then provide those real-time insights that drive the decision-making and the collaboration, which then produces the breakthrough innovation. And so we're pulling people out of these traditionally mundane tasks within organizations and pushing them into roles where they're producing, high-quality output, which inevitably is going to inspire and engage and get people really enthused about working. Obviously, it has a number of implications. An important one being around, what capabilities do we need people to be nurturing, and how do organizations really, build those capabilities in their people. And there are other implications as well. But I personally am very energized by that vision of where we're headed.
So I'm glad you hit on the point of it really does have implications across our entire workforce. For someone like me, I'm delighted to let go of some of the more administrative tasks. For someone, though, whose primary value in the work world is performing those tasks, that this would be fairly frightening.
Well, I would agree. And then you look back at the other industrial revolutions, and there are tranches of the population that become their skill that they've built becomes obsolete. And so the key is, how do organizations, nurture the right capabilities and foster the right capabilities in their people, so people can transition. And it won't be easy for all populations, if they've traditionally been focused on the repeatable work. But I also, I'm obviously a bit of an optimist, but I like to think that people, would be more interested in doing work that requires innovation and thinking and problem solving, and not just following, a mechanical process. And so, I like to think that if those opportunities were presented and the right support provided, that people would actively, step in and pursue those.
I am hopefully as optimistic as you are, and I recognize that for some segments of the population, this adjustment is going to be terrifying, because it will mean retraining later in a career. It means a level of uncertainty about income and retirement and family stability, and for each of us, it is incumbent upon us to manage our careers. And yet that's easy to say because I don't think mine's going away. It would be terrifying short term to not know if you would make it to retirement without your role going away.
Well, I would say so for those individuals. And so I think that the more support that organizations can provide, the better. And ideally, there's enough sort of rhetoric, or there's enough information that's emerging through popular press and other channels that illuminate the way that we're headed. And so, you'd like to think that people sort of have a sense for what's coming down the track and can begin to prepare. But I think it's an essential step that we have to take from a macro perspective. And I think once that step is taken, it will really enable that step change in productivity. And, all of a sudden organizations will be, the rate of innovation, breakthrough innovation will skyrocket. And I think we'll find that, organizational workforces will become much more engaged because, their time won't be soaked up by these, low-value administrative tasks.
I absolutely agree, and I look forward to the time where I have to do fewer of them. So for me, this is a bright future, and again, I go to the place of both. There are winners and losers in any kind of big change, and how do we as organizations act what I'll call ethically? And I realize we have different people will see different things as ethical. I have seen some organizations make a commitment that over a certain period of time they will retrain and not exit people unless they aren't actively engaged in their own retraining. And I like that idea of moving to the future in a way that we're not creating a class of people who are considered disposable, and yet we each kind of own responsibility for our own ultimate outcome.
That's very well put, and I think the way that you distill that, people that don't have these sort of transactional skills and therefore in more control of their world is a hugely energizing one. It strips out a lot of the anxiety and stress within organizations, around, am I replaceable, or, will my job immediately go away? When you're fostering the types of capabilities in people like the problem solving, collaborating, innovating, executing, those types of skills, to your point, are hard to replicate, and so that you're giving control back to people, which is what they really crave, and is a big driver of sort of happiness and contentment and engagement.
Thank you for summarizing that, and so I don't want to lose track of the main theme, which is simplifying, and I would say what I hear really is also realigning so that we are focusing on doing the high-value tasks aligned with our strategy and lining up structure, process, culture, and communications to ensure that all of those are driving everyone in the organization toward doing the work that is most high value for that person at that level and that role. Is that an accurate summation?
Absolutely. I think essentially, this huge opportunity to simplify work, if pursued, is going to liberate a ton of costs and overhead. It's going to focus the workforce on the things that truly matter. That in itself will drive a productivity step change. Will help people to spend their most productive time on the highest value pieces of work, which will drive innovation, and will inevitably engage the workforce. So the business case for simplifying work is a strong one, and I think we're at a time where it's really possible to take that blank piece of paper and look at your organization and the purpose of your organization and think anew around how work gets done, and don't get stuck in these traditional ways of structuring and managing work. We are in this time where we have a great opportunity to rethink how work is done and get people focused on the things that are most important, which is very exciting.
Thank you. I think that's a beautiful wrap up. Let's now move to restate the name of your book, where people would get it, I'm assuming Amazon, and how they would reach you to learn more about engaging either you or the work or asking questions.
Sure. So the title of the book is Simplify Work, Crushing Complexity to Liberate Innovation, Productivity, and Engagement. It hits bookstores, bookshelves on February the 5th. It's already available on Kindle version on Amazon. And if you're interested in the topic and about more about me and my consulting firm, you can go to simplifywork.com. And I can get contacted at jnewton@simplifywork.com.
Great, beautiful, thank you. So this is Innovative Leaders Driving Thriving Organizations. I'm your host, Maureen Metcalf, and I want to reiterate the call to action for all of our listeners. We are in a time of massive complexity, and for most of us, at least for me, I struggle many days to get through the day, get everything done I need to. And how do we as leaders and employees take stock of the work we're trying to get done, focus on the critical things, and identify ways to offload that content that isn't most critical? So I invite you to evaluate what you're doing, as I will, and please listen in for additional ways for you to innovate how you're leading. Contact me at info@innovateleader.com if I would love to hear your feedback, or on Facebook, Innovative Leaders Driving Thriving Organizations. Thank you for listening, and we hope you tune in again next week.